I just played through Sonic Dream Team, the newest Sonic 3D platformer available exclusively on Apple Arcade for some awful reason. To start with, let's get the presentation out of the way. It's audio-visual splendor up in here. Everything is gorgeous. It's vibrant. The level themes are very distinct and they're all uniquely special. I love especially the tutorial world. Has these like safe-looking inflatable toys in the background. It all looks like a preschool playground. It's both mocking and sweethearted at the same time. There's a story. With a surprising amount of cutscenes, the story has some strong characterization and some very neat, if inconsequential, world building. They introduce so many cool ideas that you just know you're not going to see in any other Sonic game ever again, which is a shame, but, at least they get some mileage out of it. The controls and level design present here, the game is largely linear, but the controls and level design are simplified because it's an Apple Arcade game, and the game has to be playable on any device which supports Apple Arcade. But it's not too big a hit. The level designs are still inventive, and they feel like Sonic most of the time. The high-speed platforming is as rhythmic and flow-based as ever. If this was the next 3D Sonic, I couldn't be too mad about that. I'd restart levels, I try to make the perfect line to the finish, and it all feels like poetry in motion. The big gimmick here is the character switching. You can play as flying characters, gliding characters, or as speed characters, and they get a lot of mileage out of this premise. You see every level from new perspectives when you switch characters, both visually and mechanically. It boils down to pretty simple and satisfying platforming and pathfinding, but with each character archetype getting their own unique level layout, it feels like a completely different game at some points. The Knuckles and Rouge levels feel like platforming mazes. The Tails and Cream levels are more slow, exploration focused, and there's actually a fair balance between exploration-focused gameplay and straightforward gameplay in general, but it's all fast. There are very few times, though they are there, where the game actually asks you to slow down. They find some creative use for every mechanic. Everything gets explored in some way. The worst thing I can say about the character switching is that the gliding feels bad, but it hasn't felt good since Sonic Adventure 2, and the climbing is fine. Far and away, the biggest problem with Sonic Dream Team is, I've said this so many times about modern Sonic games, this serious lack of challenge. Dying means nothing in this game. It's not just about losing rings, even though that's hard. Like, even if you do lose all your rings and actually perish, you just spawn back right on the platform you fell off of, and there's no consequence for anything. Even in the timed levels, I would often finish with more time than I started with, and there's no ranking system, so there's no incentive to push myself to do better. The ranking system was a brilliant addition, because if you really cared about exploring the mechanics, you could push yourself to get the S rank, but here there's no impetus for that, and it just draws to mind how, even though this game has an ostensibly high skill ceiling, right? There's no reason to use any of it. There's not even a difficulty curve. None of the mechanics actually matter. It feels pretty much completely trivial when you figure out that there's no stakes. The bosses are the worst offender. Like, you don't have to avoid any attack and you can just mash buttons your whole way through. I did actually beat one of the bosses by just mashing buttons. Even Forces was more challenging than this. I felt nothing while playing. It's not as though the game plays bad or looks bad. It's incapable of evoking any real emotion or any real stakes or tension or consequence. And that's a huge downside as far as I'm concerned.